7 sites to be protected around England. And stakeholders, it's good to involve stakeholders in these processes, but they were asked to set the conservation objectives. And none of them had any kind of thinking about shifting baselines. None of them had any experience of the sea as being any different from what they were familiar with. And for most of the habitats, they decided that it was perfectly acceptable to just maintain them in the present condition. Recovery was only for a minority of those habitats. And so here we see an example of institutionalized shifting baselines. Now there's another kind of protected area in Europe, which is called a special area of conservation. And here's one of them off the coast of England. And you can see the boundaries. It's in hatched area. But I'll give you a hand in spotting these bits. These are the parts that in its wisdom the UK government has decided should be protected from damaging bottom trawling and dredging activity. All the rest of it is open to dredging and bottom trawling. And you might ask yourself, how on earth are we going to protect and recover that area of sea if all we're going to do is to protect these tiny little postage stamp sized pieces? And it's worse than that, because in the law underpinning the protection of these marine conservation zones, it is a defense in the law that the act which is alleged to constitute the offense was, one, an act done for the purpose of and in the course of sea fishing, and the effect of the act on the protected feature in question could not reasonably have been avoided. Well, with such tiny pieces of protection, that defense will always be upheld, I think. You could trawl across one of those protected areas in the time it takes to boil a kettle for a cup of tea. So this is hardly ambitious protection. And in fact, the most amazing thing about these bits of protection is that the objective is the protection of worms. So all of that life that I've been talking about, all of those big fish, none of those are a target of protection in these areas. Now I see some frowns and some disbelief on faces here, but no, the sum total of our European ambition to protect sea life is worms. In this case, it is pretty much pathetic. Now, the world has changed a great deal since the beginning of the 19th century, and what has happened is we've seen a reversal in the footprint of fishing. Then there was a huge area that wasn't exploited. Now there's a huge area that is exploited. And the amount that is protected is paltry. And using MP Atlas, what we can see is that there's a tally of 2.1% coverage of marine protected areas around the world, of which just under half is fully protected from exploitation. So there's an awful lot of protected areas out there which are not doing very much. And that is something which there is an ambition to change. And the ambition behind it is the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, which has set a target of 10% coverage for marine protected areas by 2020. On the current trajectory, we might get to 6.1%, maybe a little bit more. The rate of protecting new areas is going up. But if they're all protected areas that do very little in the way of actual protection, then what is the point of this? It's really a fig leaf for politicians rather than a benefit for life in the sea. So I think the message that I really want to say here is that if you want an MPA to be effective, you have to invest heavily in protection. It's not going to do it without that. And I want to elaborate on this point just a little bit in the next few slides. This is a very well-known and well-established relationship. When you fish an area, you start losing the big stuff, and you start losing the habitat structure, and gradually, over time, what you see is a diminution in the amount of life present and a scraping away of lots of the habitat structure. You can do that spatially, you can do that over time. So you could substitute time for that axis here, and then for now in this relationship. But the lesson from it, the lesson from history, is that you lose a great deal at very low intensities of fishing. And this is an example of the relationship between the amount of predatory fish and the amount of fishing that's going on Caribbean reefs from counts done around the Caribbean. You see, you have the collapse in predator biomass at very low fishing intensities. And this is something which was experienced in the past. If you look at this quote from 1863, when I first went to sea up to 5 years back, I've seen the boats bring from 50 to 100 large skate ashore in the summer season, and now you scarcely see a boat bring 1 or 2 ashore in the course of a day. So it was happening then, and it's happening now. And if we want things to come back, the lesson from this relationship is that we have to drive protection up to very high levels before you offer refuges for things that are highly vulnerable like this, before you're going to reestablish communities of life on the seabed. And it's going to take a very long time to achieve that as well. There's another reason for giving a high level of protection. And one of the things about protected areas that's very widely spoken about is the effects that they might have. Let me just scrap this for a moment. I'll come and stand here because then you won't be irritated by the mic going up and down. But it's the effects that they can have beyond their boundaries. So what a well-protected area will do will be build up stocks of fish and start spilling offspring into surrounding areas to recover places nearby. So imagine that we have an island here and that we protect 10% of the sea around it in protected areas. Now imagine that we give those protected areas a little protection, and that doubles the amount of egg production from each of those, and you can see that what that doubling does is to expand the influence of those protected areas. But if we were to protect it highly from exploitation and raise the game by tenfold, 10 times more fish eggs per unit of area coming out of those protected areas, then you can start having a regional effect. Then you can see the benefits extending beyond boundaries. And if we want to get back those seabed ecosystems in their highly complex, diverse state, crusted with invertebrates, we have to exclude all of the mobile fishing gears because they're totally incompatible with the survival of this kind of ecosystem. This is a sort of thing that you will get when you trawl and dredge habitats. And there's a whole series of reasons why you would want to build up the biomass again, build up the abundance of life in the sea. One of them is that the world is changing extremely rapidly, and the more life that there is, the more productive it is, the more resilience there will be against global change. There's another reason, if you're in the fishing industry, having those buffers against ecosystem change is going to be a good thing. Having those sources to supply offspring to the surrounding fishing grounds is important to buffering you against the impacts of a changing world. And then there are other sorts of things too. A greater abundance can benefit in other sorts of ways, so that you see things, ecosystems functioning in different ways from the way they do in these depleted and damaged states. And finally, of course, if you want to give things refuges in the sea, building up populations is going to greatly drive down extinction risk. And here's another example. This is an example of a transformation of a seabed caused by scallop dredging in the south of England. So here you see an area at the top which has been protected from scallop dredging and an area below which has not. And what you see is a seabed ecosystem functioning in a completely different way from the one that is in this degraded state. And if we want the sea to perform all of these functions which underpin the environmental quality, which maintain it in a way that benefits people, then we need to have intact and functional seabed ecosystems. And there was a report in the journal Nature just last week looking at outbreaks of jellyfish in the South China Sea. And this is the investigator quoted here: "Jellyfish have survived all 5 mass extinctions and they're likely to thrive where others fail. And one of the things that they have seen is that jellyfish have this little bottom living stage, and those do much better in degraded, impoverished bottom habitats than they do in habitats that are full of predators and complex and covered in other life. So go figure. Now, lest you start thinking that all of this is over there, somewhere else, and we're doing just fine in the United States, in terms of the highest level of protection, we're not. And this is a tally done by the Marine Conservation Institute, looking at the amount of no-take coverage, the highest level of protection, the sort which is going to give refuges to these big fish and so on. And really, in terms of the number of states that are active in creating these places, there's only a small number. And if you look at the federal picture as well, then what you see is most of it out there in somebody else's backyard, and not around the coast of mainland North America. And I put in here 36.4% coverage in the Pacific Islands due to Barack Obama's recent announcement of an extension in the remote Pacific Islands protected area. That's my guesstimate. It may not be quite that exact figure, but so what you can see is we're doing well in some places, but we're doing very badly in a lot of places, and we really need to try and reinvigorate management and conservation and go for high levels of protection. There's a little bit of a kind of defeatist tone creeping into a lot of the writing on marine protected areas, and that tone runs along the lines of, it's too tough to create protected areas that exclude all fishing. So let's just have nice compromise. Politicians love compromise. It's good to involve communities in ways that keeps everybody happy. But by keeping everyone happy, the one thing that is not so happy is going to be the life in the sea. And we're not going to get the oceans back to what they need to be to give them the resilience to deal with the changing world that we're in right now, unless we have lots of areas that are given this high level of protection. And so I'd rather see the conversation come round to, instead of compromising on protection and saying, let's have a protected area here and we'll protect it all kind of lightly and feel-good way, we should be zoning those so that there are high levels of protection interspersed with lower levels of protection. And we can see that they work. Here in the Keys, those Goliath groupers are making a comeback. There are areas which are protected to this highest level, which are building up populations of fish again. And Billy was just talking about the dry tortugas and the comeback of fish in areas that are fully protected from exploitation there. And it's wonderful to see them, but we need many, many more examples like this in order to make a real difference at large scales to the oceans. It was one of your great philosophers who said, in wildness is the preservation of the world. And I think he was meaning it from a more human-centric viewpoint, but really from the point of view of sustaining ecosystems in a state which will underpin human life. He was spot on. And so Thoreau's words are as important and resonant today as they ever were. So thank you very much.
Other coastal states have likewise at me and smiled a little bit. She said, "Look, we just signed the paper."
So what you need is a beneficent dictatorship, isn't it? I think that's the hard part, is getting people to come on board. And I think the problem is that because of the shifting baseline that we all are part of, that we're all experiencing, it's hard for people to see those groupers coming back and not think there's plenty of them for us to fish. And yet you and I know that there are hardly any Goliath groupers compared to the number that there were when people were going out there and bringing back 15 or 20 Goliath groupers from a day's fishing trip. So I think the expectations have gone down. And if you look at those shifting baselines, people with huge quantities of fish in Key West coming in the 1950s and a few years ago coming in with a little small board of fish, the smiles on their faces are as big today as they were in the 1950s. So people are still enjoying the experience, and it's that enjoyment that they feel is threatened by the establishment of no-take areas. And I think we've just got to keep going at the, talking about how these areas do actually benefit fisheries as well as conservation. And it is a win-win, but it takes commitment, and it takes long-term protection to a high level to bring back those really big fish that used to be around in the past. So, I can't give you a magic answer to it. There is none. I think it's decades of hard work, and you're embarked on that process here, and you're much further along in it than in many other parts of the world. I wish in England we were as far ahead in conservation as you are in Florida. So although it doesn't look perfect to you, and there's a lot of headwinds to conservation here, it looks a lot better than from where I'm sitting in the UK.
Hi, Mr. Robert. My name is Lisa Boyle, and I'm an environmental attorney, and I'm from California. And I was the director of legal policy at a group called Field Bay. And you may be familiar with our work on marine protected areas along the coast of California.
Yes, I am, yeah.
Wonderful. And we are seeing tremendous rebound, and we worked in tandem with the fisheries. We really formed strong alliances, and I think that's what really makes it successful. Because, of course, as with anything, it's monitoring and enforcement that makes a law effective. And if you don't truly have buy-in, there's no way that you could continually monitor and enforce if the fishermen are not bought into this marine protected.
Yeah, excellent point.
To what degree has the oil and gas exploration and extraction in the North Sea affected fisheries in the UK?
Well, that's a good question. There are a lot of oil and gas rigs in the North Sea, and interestingly, this is what you can do if you've got lots of enthusiastic students. You can put students onto questions which, you couldn't get a research grant to pursue this question very easily, but you can get a student to do it. And what she did was to write to a lot of oil rig divers and ask them the question about what did they see underneath the rigs. And the answer is a lot of fish and a lot of big fish. And it's pretty much the only place in the North Sea where you will find the big old behemoths, the giant cod that used to be around. So they are not pristine places. There are lots of contaminants in the vicinity of oil rigs, but there is an exclusion zone to fishing, no take zone, 500 meters around each of those installations, and those are very well enforced. So they are the only no-take areas in the North Sea to speak of. So there are some interesting lessons to be learned, but it's pretty much anecdotal. Yeah.
Dr. Robbins, what is your opinion of areas which aren't necessarily marine protected, but
The question was, what do I think of areas that are not marine protected areas but are highly regulated? Well, the answer is that is a vital complement to marine protected areas. We're not going to bring back the condition of the sea to a higher level if we don't use all of the tools available to us. And it's no use having protected areas if you trash the surrounding places too. So you do have to have the very best of fisheries management partnered with protected areas, but you're not going to get the recovery of life in its full spectrum and diversity and abundance and spectacle if you don't have those protected areas too. So on its own, good fishery management isn't going to cut it because good fishery management will maintain areas in a productive barren for shrimps, for example. And if you're managing a shrimp fishery, you've got no great incentive to want to have all of this other stuff come back. You're going to want to keep it in that shrimp condition. So you've got to have a whole mosaic of different pieces of management and embed protected areas in a broader regime of excellent management too.
Hi, Alan. My name is Kurt Lieber. I run a small nonprofit called Ocean Defenders. I remove abandoned commercial fishing here in California. And I've been intimately involved with a lot of the MPA talks that have gone on in California. And it's constantly thrown in our faces that you can't prove that they work. Can you cite some specific examples that we can go to continually, and you have some kind of information on a website or something that I can use with my clients?
Well, there are reviews coming out all the time, and one of the depressing things is that we tend to go round and round in circles. And guess what? The British government has just commissioned a study to ask whether there's any need for marine reserves that are highly protected in UK waters. Well, duh, We've written so many papers on this, and I was contacted just this morning by a person who's going to be undertaking that study saying, do you have any input? So I said, well, yes, but you